we commit ourselves to Christ, to all that he has given to us, we find life to be fulfilled if we walk and talk with him daily. We commit ourselves to his ways. His provision to us is more than enough. Yet often we find ourselves forgetting what God has given to us, and we are consumed with the things around us rather than the things that God has given to us. If we go back to the Old Testament reading today in Deuteronomy, God set for the people, and not just for the people of the Old Testament, but for all of us. When he created us like himself. However, he also gave to us an ability to choose. He was not forcing anything upon us, but he was giving to us the authority, the ability to make the choice. Very much like him, he also has that ability. And so he created us much in his image. And he said, "See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, and death and adversity. In that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his judgments, that you may live and multiply, and that the Lord your God may bless you in the land where you are entering in to possess it." If we listen to what he says, it would seem as though what happens in our life is our choice. It's amazing how that we think that we are captivated or enslaved by the things around us or life itself. But God said in Deuteronomy, "I've set before you life, prosperity, death, and adversity. Choose you this day." It would seem to say to us that the adversity in our life is what we've chosen. We choose it. Most of us would argue about that. We don't want it. But if it's there, is it not there because of choice? I don't say that to condemn us or to give us a difficult time, but God very clearly says, "Follow me. Choose you this day." And then he tells us what to choose. But he doesn't force us, but he tells us, "This is what I've prepared for you. If you don't want it, okay. You can reject it." And if we look at our lives, is it not much the way we live our life? We choose what we want our life to be. If we choose things other than the things of God, are we not asking for difficulties? Are we not submitting ourselves to the adversity? We don't like to think that. We like to think that, no, my life was meant to be good. And it's amazing how many times Christians who have chosen Christ, they have become born again, and they think that because they're born again, everything's going to be nice. Everything's going to be prosperous. Everything's going to be great. But yet they have not understood or have not been taught that choosing Christ has a cost. It means follow him. It means commit to his ways, that you may have the blessings that he has promised. Jesus shows us in the gospel today that there's a great multitude of people following him. Multitude. We don't know exactly how many people by count it is, but it's a multitude. If you talk about multitudes, you're talking about not two or three. You're talking about maybe thousands. And as he sees them and he understands man, because remember, he's of God, and he knows what's in a man's mind and heart. He understands the people that are there in the mob, the multitude. Shouldn't use the word mob because it has a negative context. But sometimes it's the mob. But he speaks to them. And he knows that there are some who are there just basically out of curiosity. He understands that. They came because, hey, there's a big crowd. Something must be happening. There are others who come because he feeds them. They're getting something out of it for themselves. Others are there because they saw the healings, awesome things, and they think this man has got great power. But what he's telling to them is more than these things that you are thinking. You need to commit yourself. When you accept what I have given to you, then there is a cost, a price that goes with it. You say you love me. If you love me, then you will follow me. You will obey my words. You go back to Deuteronomy again, you'll see this is what he says. You will listen to my voice and you will walk with me. You will obey the things that I have set before you. Possibly, the scripture doesn't go into the depth of this, but you understand Christ was addressing this issue. He understood there were some that were there with wrong motivations. They were not evil. They were not doing things that were going to hurt somebody, but they didn't come to receive what he had from them. They didn't come for that life that he intended to give them. They didn't know, didn't understand the forgiveness of sins. Didn't understand the redemption. They were just curious. And so he addressed the issue so that they would begin to understand that there is more to it than just a simple agreement. There's a cost that is paid. He goes then to something very interesting and difficult to understand. He said, if anyone comes to me, he's addressing the crowd now, the multitude. He knows that there are many there with different agendas, different reasons. He says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate, thought we couldn't hate, thought it was a lie. Hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life. I looked up that word in the Greek, hate. And it isn't hate like we think hate is. That's not what it is. Its literal meaning is you love one above the other. And what he's saying to them is saying, if you don't love me above the love you have for your father, for your mother, for your wife, for your children, for your brothers, and even for your own life, then you cannot be my disciple. That love that he has given to us is to return to him in a manner wherein he is the primary source of life. And all other things are supplemental. They add to it, but they are not the primary source of life. And so he becomes that source for us of everything. It's a little difficult for us to totally understand that, but he's saying, you must put me first in your life. It doesn't mean that family is no longer valid. It doesn't mean that you don't love your family. It doesn't mean that you don't love your children. You don't love your wife. You don't love all these things. It doesn't mean that. But it means, first of all, your commitment is to Christ. And that commitment, that love, is prioritized in him. Number one. All other things are additional. He's number one in life. This is something that in the world we live in today is perhaps not given a lot of attention, because we have so many things that draw our attentions and so many things that draw our commitments. He's talking about loyalties to him. He's talking about that commitment that is not changed or affected by anything else. It's not affected by a husband. It's not affected by a wife. Not affected by a brother. It's not affected by a sister. It's commitment that is total and unchangeable. Loyal, dependable, faithful. This is the character of Christ. And all that he did while he was here on earth, he never lost his commitment to his Father. Constantly you hear in Scripture where he was talking to the Father in prayer. He would go off to the mountains, communicate with the Father to get instructions, to get guidance, to get encouragement. His commitment was forthright. We see his commitment to his task, the loyalty of his commitment when he was arrested, when he was persecuted, when he was judged and condemned, when he was nailed to the cross. We see that commitment. Even in the midst of the persecution, he did not lose his commitment to the Father. He could have called the angels, it says, and they would have rescued him, but he didn't do this because he was committed to the Father. He was committed so much that it didn't matter what happened with his life or the things around him. He was going to walk with the Father. Nothing would take that away. We see this in Abraham's life also. God told Abraham, I'm going to make you a great nation. But in order for me to do this, you've got to leave your family. You've got to take your immediate family and go to a different country. Abraham didn't know where he was going. He didn't understand the future. But his commitment was to God. And if God told him to do this, this is what he was going to do, even if it meant separating himself from his father and mother. And if we look at Abraham's life, we see that in that separation, there were pains, there were sorrows, there were misunderstandings, but in the end, he was blessed because he was obedient. And it shows to us also that if we walk with Christ, even in fact we've lost the love for our life is not that important. The martyrs of old, how many of them were so committed to Christ, even if it meant they were going to die, they would die. Some of them lost their heads. Some of them were thrown into lions' dens. Some burned at the stake. Some, even while they were being put on the stake, said, you don't need to tie me because I will not go anywhere. I will give my life joyfully for the Lord that I love. Born or burned while standing there without anything holding them to that pole. That's the commitment he's talking about, when we're willing to sacrifice our life if the cost is there. We find in our lives today things take away our commitments to God. We make a commitment, but then we let other things interrupt. We don't follow it. We make promises, but then we don't keep them. When we make promises to God, commitments to God, our commitment needs to be unchangeable. The storms may come, the rains may come, the battles may be there, but we don't change. We're committed. We're going to follow this. He says this is needed in our lives. And sad to say, most of Christianity, when they want to win people to Christ, they don't tell them there's a price to pay. Oh, if you just accept Christ, life is going to be so beautiful. It will be, not a lie. But there's also a situation wherein you must realize there's a price that's going to be paid. Christ says, if you don't pick up your cross and follow me, you can't be my disciple. That cross is things that come against us, things that might persecute us, things that might be difficult for us to handle. But yet if we take the cross, we're going to be his disciple. He will not fail us. But it means we can't let things pull us away from that commitment that we have to him. Jesus said in 2 Corinthians, my grace is sufficient for you. Whatever it might be that will come our way, his grace is more than enough. It may seem at the moment to be more than we can handle, but his grace is sufficient. It will not fail us at any time. We think we want to give up. We think it's over. No, not with him. Going through that test, that trial, comes out with glory and honor and praise to God. It says in the readings that we are to hold fast to God. Hold fast. It's a commitment. It means that we don't waver. It's holding fast. And there's many ways we could express this and explain this. But there are times when we are confronted with things that might not be pleasant, that might not be great for us. But we waver and we make a statement, well, God understands. Yes, he understands. Your commitment is not total and complete. What he wants is the heart. He wants our whole being to be his. This is what he was telling the people. He knew who was in the crowd. He knew why they were there. They were seeking, many of them were seeking to get away from the rulership of Rome, the cruelty of Rome. They were thinking maybe he's going to become king and we can have a new life. They weren't committed to him. They were committed to what he was going to do. He understood this. And he was explaining it to the best of his ability, which is great. That you must give up your life to walk with him. It's not what you want. It's what he wants for you. To each of us, he's given us gifts. He's given us many, many things. And if only we understand them, he wants us to separate what we might want and accept what he has given to us. And fulfill that and find the joy and the happiness that comes and the honor that comes in that. In Galatians it says, did you suffer so many things in vain? This literally says to us, when God has given us something, do we then think that the flesh can perfect that which is spiritual? Most of us think that. God gives us a gift. Rather than going to him for how we can fulfill this gift, how this gift can be brought full, we go to the system of the flesh and try to learn from the flesh. And in vain, we have literally denied what God has given to us. God has given to us everything complete. All we need to do is depend upon listening to Him. But we think, no, the world can give to us more. So we turn to the world. I use an example of my sister. My sister is 10 years older than me. She was an accomplished musician. She could play the piano like Liberace. I don't know that people here know Liberace, but just an awesome. She hears something, she could play it. She didn't have to have music. She didn't go to school. But she had a gift given to her by God that just was awesome. I tried to duplicate it. I went to school to learn how to play the piano. I can't play the piano. You turn to the flesh and you can deny or destroy the gift perhaps God has given to us. Those things He gives to us are perfect. They're perfect if we will depend upon them. He will not fail us in them. My sister, when she was 85, I think it was 85, somewhere around that, she was in a home for people who needed help, home for the aged. She couldn't remember anything. She didn't know her family. She didn't know her children. Her mind was gone with dementia, whatever you call those things, old age. But she could sit down at the piano. Because in their room where they would gather together, there was a grand piano. She would sit down at the piano and play. And she would sing. She couldn't remember anything, but when it came to the gift God had given to her, even when her mind wasn't functioning the way it should normally be, she was playing the piano. And the people would sit around, and she would sit and play. I don't know how long, but they said for a long time, just sit and play and cry while she was playing. The gifts of God, the awesomeness of those gifts. But we have taken little appreciation for what God has given to us. We haven't given it the attention it could be. And it says, do you suffer so many things in vain? When we've been given this, do we twist it and make it less than what it is? Because when you're going to build a tower, count the cost. Sit down and figure it out before you start to build, so that you know. Most of us, our desire is to make it to what we call heaven. That's what we want. But do we understand the price that we have to pay to get there? Do we understand it means walking in obedience to the things of God and the ways of God? Being dependable in our commitment to God. Not letting anything twist us from our commitments. Doesn't matter what they are. But when we are committed to a task, we've given our word, nothing can change that if we're going to fulfill it. Jesus said, if you are not willing to give up everything, you won't be my disciple. You know, we have a lot of things we hold dear to us. We all do. We all have things that are very precious to us. We won't give them up. But unless we're willing to let those things go, He has to be number one in our life. He has to be number one. Whether, as it says here, father, mother, wife, daughter, children, brothers, even your own life cannot be number one. It has to be God. It has to be Him. If we walk with Him, then we're going to make the task to be His disciples. Now, the question: who is a disciple? Disciple is one who follows the Master, who listens and obeys, and who is a duplicate of the one he is following. Like an ambassador. Doesn't have his own opinions as far as what is being done. He may have opinions, but those things are secondary. His task is priority. And in our lives, our Christian life is priority. We're not to be ashamed of it. We're not to be held back by it. Sometimes, we may be put into a situation where if we say we are a Christian, we're going to be persecuted. Okay, we take it. We carry our cross. Because if we're willing to carry the cross, Jesus said, unless you pick up your cross. Unless. That means you have no choice. If you're going to be that disciple, you take the cross. He took the cross for us. It was not pleasant. It was not pleasant. But He did not back off. He did not try to make it easier. He did not curse those who were persecuting Him. He did not condemn them to hell, which probably most of us, I said us, would do to those who persecute us. We want them to go to hell. He didn't do that, and we shouldn't either. He had compassion even for those who were persecuting Him. He loved them all. That's the commitment He's calling us to. It's a task, difficult. Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. Remember the lesson a couple of weeks ago when people came to the door and knocked on the door had already been closed, and the Master said, I don't know who you are. Here, He says, I know my disciples. I know them. They were not His disciples. They were followers, but they were not His disciples. We want to make sure that in our lives, this is where we are. He who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. He who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. This is what it says. Doesn't mean you can't love. Don't misunderstand. But the primary, the number one love is for Christ. For what He's done for us and how we live out our lives. And so this is the challenge that is ours. It's a challenge. Because we find life so difficult at times. We want to compromise. We have commitments, but we want, other things to be there. I've known in the past, I can't say exactly when this was, but people who would say, we can't come to church today because we have visitors. And I would tell them, if you have visitors, bring the visitors to church. Your primary task of commitment on Sunday is church. Now there are some reasons why that doesn't get fulfilled or can't be fulfilled, but that's the primary one. There's no excuse. But in God, we have love and compassion and mercy. Let me just complete this with this one statement. We are not perfect. But we should be aiming for perfection. We've all failed. All have sinned and come short the glory of God. But at the same time, we should be seeking the perfection of our commitment to Christ. There may be valid reasons for some of these things, but in our heart, our commitment is number one to God. He is our Lord and our Master.